Hello VC, Paul here. I have been prompted by Dr. Deadwax to do a VC intro video, so here's my attempt at doing an intro video for myself. The way I'd like to do it is I've selected 11 or 12 albums that I think best represent some of the stuff that I'm into, or at least some of the things that have been most influential to me. It's not to say that I'm limited to these things, but there are a lot of other things that I'm also interested in. So just to start out, I'm into digital stuff as well as vinyl. I get vinyl when I can, but I'm also an audiophile. So if I hear that there's a good digital source that's really good, then I'm going to go after the digital source. If the vinyl source is really good, then I'm going to go after the vinyl source. So that really is what I'm after. Now, to go into the albums. So this is Van Halen's 1984. This is the first album that I ever purchased with my own money. When I was young, I played Van Halen to death. I just love this band. I still do to this day. One of the things that I'd like to discuss is kind of going on a classic rock diet, so to speak. A lot of folks complain about things getting overplayed. You lose interest in certain music, so if I get to the point where I think that I'm going to lose interest, I've played it too much, then I just put it down for a while. I'll revisit it later when I want to hear it again. But I don't believe in playing things so much that you kill it. The next thing that I'd like to show is Cronus. This is the soundtrack to this IMAX film. This was composed by Michael Stearns. I saw this in an IMAX theater in 1986. And after I saw this particular film, I fell in love with the soundtrack and I fell in love with the composer Michael Stearns. To this day, I've tried to hunt down every single piece of music that he has composed and released officially. There is one piece that I'm looking for on CD, and that is his Lyra composition. So if you happen to see it, please let me know, because that's the only thing that I have remaining that I'm looking for. I'm a fan of classical music as well. I just happened to grab this particular piece. I'm a fan of both Leonard Bernstein and Glenn Gould. I'm also a fan of Beethoven. This particular album was issued by Impex. They do a wonderful job reissuing a lot of Columbia and Sony's catalog. Their previous incarnation was Cisco, and they were doing a lot of Steely Dan reissues and a few other reissues, classical reissues. So if you ever find a Cisco or an Impex release, I highly recommend it. They are being mastered by Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio, the same folks that do, or the same person that does the Music Matters releases that I'm a big fan of. When I got into college, I picked up a copy of this for the first time. So previously I had Led Zeppelin 4, and I liked Stairway to Heaven, but I heard this, and after that point in time, I just fell in love with the group. It was one of those bands that was playing non-stop. It got to the point where I played all their studio stuff, all their official live stuff, and then I really got into the bootleg material. And the bootleg material kept my interest in the band going. I still have a strong interest in the band. I still seek out new bootlegs. There's a bunch of new stuff that is being released in Japan like once every 6 months, and yeah, I'm searching for that new live show that hasn't been heard before. This particular issue was one of the Classic Records releases. In my opinion, yes, these things are the things that are the pressings of the albums that are highly sought after. And yes, there is a reason why. In my opinion, yes, these are some of the best sounding albums. I have some of the original pressings, and it's hit or miss with the original pressings. With this, because they were pressed in such limited numbers, at least on my system, they sound fantastic. When I was in college, I was working at a record store. I was also DJing, One of the good and bad things about working in a record store is you get exposed to a lot of new music, a lot of promos, but the downside is a lot of the money that you earn goes back to the music store. So when I was working in the music store, I got a CD promo copy of this particular album. This is Tom Waits' Bone Machine. Tom Waits, if you're not familiar with him, he's kind of in the vein of Captain Beefheart. He's an acquired taste for a lot of people because he has a very gravelly voice. I like the latter part of his career after he met and married Kathleen Brennan. This is not my favorite album by his, but this is the first one that really got me hooked on Tom Waits. Also, when I was working in the music store, I started to explore older music from the 50s and the 60s, not the rock and roll stuff, but exotica and lounge, and I became a big fan of Julie London. So this is one of my favorite albums by Julie London. I think the title of the album says it all. So after I graduated from college, I picked up a magazine called College Music Journal. This was a fantastic magazine because every month you got a CD release of new music. A lot of it was, stuff that's being played in college radio stations. At the time, that was a great resource for getting exposed to new music. I picked up an album by the group Faithless. I have a couple of the records. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to show right now. But through Faithless, I actually discovered this band, which I discussed before for a tutors contest. And this is the group Bent. This is their second album called The Everlasting Blink. Has some very nice printed inners with photos of the band. Again, this is one of the bands that sort of like Led Zeppelin I fell in love with. Again, I really like them because of the variety they offer. None of their songs really sound the same. They're sampling different tracks, older tracks. This particular album has a song called Magic Love, which samples a Captain and Tennille song. So they get a mix of singers, so you get a nice variety of different tunes, all sample, electronic based. I highly recommend this album if you can find it. So one of the nice things about my job was it's taken me all over the world. I actually spent 2.5 years in Russia, a year in Munich, and I did some time in Tokyo, Japan as well. And in my travels, particularly in Western Europe, I came across this compilation series. This is Hotel Kostas. This is a fantastic series, if you can find it. Unfortunately, they only released 5 albums on vinyl. This particular one is a picture disc for folks that are fans of picture discs. I'm not a big fan of picture discs because they really don't sound that great. And it's unfortunate that they didn't release the entire catalog on CD. This actually has a nice sampling of European electronic, lounge, new jazz, electro swing stuff done by this guy, Stefan Pompomiak. So, if you see some of the CDs, I recommend giving it a sample. Not all the songs are great, but it actually has a lot of good stuff. Some of the years it's been hit or miss. Unfortunately, they haven't made he hasn't put together a new compilation in the past 4 or 5 years. I think they ended this series, which is too bad. The other great thing about the series is they've always featured models. I've always enjoyed the covers to these albums. Another thing that I'm really big into is world music. I pulled this particular album and I pulled it for Robert Z. So Robert Z is a big Madonna fan. So Robert Z, Mylene Farmer, if you can find her, I highly recommend it. This is the, she's actually Canadian, but she did her albums in France. She is essentially the French version of Madonna. In some cases, I think she exceeds Madonna. She's very provocative. She's changed up her style, just like Madonna, through the years. One of the fascinating things about her is she actually lives in California. I think that's by choice. I mean, nobody here in the United States knows who she is. But if you can find her stuff, I highly recommend it. I'll include a link to one of her songs down below. She does great stuff. She has worked with Moby on a couple of things. Just very generic kind of label with Mylene Farmer on it. Even if you don't speak French, and I don't, the music is just fantastic. Another band that I got exposed to while working in Europe is a Dutch band called To Kraak Smaak. They've released 4 albums in their catalog. Again, folks, you look at iTunes, they peg this band as electronic. I think just pegging them as electronic is kind of an unfair distinction. This particular album, yes, it does have some electronic elements, but it has a lot of soul elements as well. As far as I'm aware, everyone who contributed to this album is Dutch. If I'm wrong, please let me know. Put something in the comments. But if you haven't heard of Kraak Smaak, definitely give this album a listen. This was released by Jalapeno Records in the UK. The labels are kind of the same as the album cover. Nothing too exciting. The last album I'm going to show you guys, again, as you can see from some of my other videos, is a jazz album. This is my favorite artist, or jazz artist of all time, which is Art Blakey, and this just happens to be my favorite album. In particular, I love his version of A Night in Tunisia. The drumming on this thing is just explosive. If you want a good representation of what Art Blakey is capable of, definitely listen to this album. Listen to A Night in Tunisia, the title track. Again, music matters. Very nice gatefold. Nice shot of Mr. Blakey here. Replica of the cover. It's funny how I made my pathway to Art Blakey. I was a casual jazz fan before I encountered, not this particular album, but Monin. And I actually heard Art Blakey's Monin for the first time shopping in a Tower Records in Shibuya, Tokyo. And I heard the album playing in the background. I went and asked what the staff, hey, who is this? And they brought out the CD. I purchased it, and after that, I delved into the Blue Note catalog. And in particular, Art Blakey. I just love that album so much. Before, just like a lot of people, I probably had Louis Armstrong album in my collection. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. I thought that was great, but I just did not delve into jazz. And Art Blakey is the reason why I really delved into Blue Note. So those are the albums that I'd like to show for my introduction. Again, there's a lot more music that I'm into. Hopefully here in the future I'll show you some of my acquisitions as time progresses. So please leave comments. Hopefully you'll enjoy what I have to show, and thanks for watching.